to Know Your Rights, Examining the Bill of Rights, an online civics tutorial for students in 7th grade. Click Next to get started. Let's review some basics before we dive into the individual amendments of the Bill of Rights. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of this nation. It establishes our federal or national government, and it applies to all Americans. The Constitution was ratified or officially adopted in 1789. The Constitution can be changed officially by the amendment process. Official changes to the document are called amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution was controversial right from the start. Before it was ratified, American leaders and thinkers fell into two different groups: Federalists, who supported the Constitution, and Anti-Federalists, who opposed it. The Federalists wanted a strong federal government to create a stable, powerful nation that would stand the test of time. They were comfortable with a federal government that was more powerful than the governments of the states. This same approach concerned Anti-Federalists. They opposed a strong federal government because they feared it might become too powerful. They wanted most government powers reserved for the people and for the states. The Federalists won this battle, but in order to gain support for ratifying the Constitution, they struck a deal with the Anti-Federalist leaders. The new Constitution would soon be amended to include a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was ratified and added to the Constitution in 1791, just 2 years later. The Bill of Rights consists of the first 10 constitutional amendments only. Its main purpose is to clearly state which rights the governments cannot take away from the people. Because of this, the amendments contain many phrases like "shall make no law," "shall not be infringed," and "shall not be violated" when discussing the people's rights. By stating which rights governments can take away, the Constitution explains what rights the people ultimately have. At the same time, some rights are expressed in positive language like "shall enjoy the right" and "shall be preserved." In these cases, the Constitution is stating affirmatively the rights guaranteed to all Americans. Let's practice what you've learned so far. Read these statements about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and click all the ones that are correct. Then click Submit. We'll start, naturally, by looking at the First Amendment. This amendment guarantees some of the most important rights to all Americans. Here's the actual language from the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. There's a lot going on in this single sentence. In fact, this one amendment actually guarantees 5 different freedoms of expression. First, it guarantees freedom of religion. There can be no law establishing an official religion for the United States. The U.S. isn't officially a Christian nation, or a Jewish nation, or a Muslim nation, or a Hindu nation, or a Buddhist nation, or anything else. That's not true of all other countries. Many do have an official state religion, and sometimes citizens can get in trouble for not following it. But not in the United States. Here, believers in all the religions we just mentioned, and many more besides, can freely practice their beliefs as they see fit. Like many of the other rights you'll learn about today, the freedom of religion is not unlimited. Can an American break the law or hurt another person, and then be excused for their actions because they say it was part of their religion? Almost certainly not. Religious practices still need to exist within the laws of this country. But aside from extreme examples like this, Americans basically have the freedom to believe in anything they wish, in pretty much any manner they wish. The First Amendment also guarantees 2 important and related freedoms: freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Freedom of speech gives Americans the broad right to express their opinions and say what they want without punishment. This includes opinions and views that might be unpopular or controversial. In fact, this kind of speech needs the most protection of all. Speech doesn't just refer to the words that come out of people's mouths. It can be the words you post on a blog online. It can be a campaign sign on your front lawn. It can be a slogan on a t-shirt you wear. It can be a bumper sticker on your car. All these forms of expression are considered protected speech. This freedom is not unlimited. Like we said, The First Amendment protects even controversial speech. In this country, are you allowed to criticize the government, even the president? Yes. But are you allowed to threaten the president's safety? You are not. Threatening to hurt anyone, especially the president, breaks a law and is not considered protected speech. Likewise, you can't yell "fire" in a crowded theater as a joke, since it might start a panic and hurt people. These kinds of speech violate laws, so they're not considered protected. They're considered dangerous. Freedom of the press is related, but a little different. This freedom gives the media, which includes newspapers, magazines, television, websites, and even social media, the freedom to do their job and report the truth, in print, over the airwaves, or online. This includes news stories that are controversial or unpopular. As we've said, these kinds of stories require the most protection of all. How about if a newspaper publishes a story exposing a scandal or a crime? Is that protected speech? Yes, but only if the story is true. If it isn't, if the newspaper just made something up that's false or completely inaccurate, that's not protected speech. The paper could be sued and would probably lose in court. That's not all the First Amendment covers. The American people are also guaranteed the freedom of assembly. This means that people can assemble, meet, gather, or come together in groups. This right especially applies to public spaces, like streets or parks. Why is this an important right? People need to be able to legally assemble for the purposes of sharing and promoting their ideas. Like the others we've learned about, this right is not unlimited. Can a bunch of people decide to assemble in your backyard? No, not unless you allow them. That's your private property, and if they are there without permission, that's trespassing. Do people have the right to assemble if they're throwing things, or tipping over cars? Again, no. Only peaceable assembly is protected by the Constitution. That specific word is used in the First Amendment. Closely related to the freedom of assembly is the freedom to petition the government. This is a fancy way of saying that Americans have the right to tell their government when they think it's wrong, and when it needs to change. This freedom can take the form of writing a letter to your congressperson, but it also includes activities like marching, picketing, and protesting in public. In many nations, the people do not have this freedom. Protesting your government can get you arrested, or worse. But in the U.S., the right to petition is built into the law of our land, the Constitution. As you might have guessed, this right, like the others, is not unlimited. Citizens need to do their petitioning peacefully, and in a way that obeys all laws. For example, if you wish to protest in a public park with some friends, you will probably need to apply for and receive a permit to be able to do this. And if the protest becomes a riot, it would obviously become an illegal assembly, and the protesters might be arrested. Some of these scenarios or situations are protected by the First Amendment, and some are not. Read them and pick all the ones that are protected expression under the freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment. Let's move on to the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. It says, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. This amendment guarantees Americans the right to keep and bear arms. In other words, weapons. Although many different types of weapons exist, when Americans talk about the Second Amendment, they are almost always talking about guns. The language in this amendment has always been debatable, because the text begins by referring to a well-regulated militia, a group of volunteer soldiers. Some people have argued that the Bill of Rights only gives militia members, or the military in general, the right to bear arms. But that's not the view of most people, who have interpreted the amendment as applying to all Americans. The Supreme Court agrees with this view, ruling in 2008 that private citizens have the right to own guns for lawful purposes. The right to bear arms is not unlimited. Gun sales and ownership are regulated by numerous laws. Can a small child walk into a store and buy a gun? How about someone convicted of multiple felonies? The answer is no in both cases. There are also limits on what kind of arms people may privately own. An American adult can legally buy and keep a pistol or a shotgun, but can he own a bazooka? How about a grenade? A nuclear missile? No, no, and no. Private citizens cannot arm themselves with any and all types of weapons, despite the protections of the Second Amendment. Moving on, the Third Amendment says, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house, without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner prescribed by law. This amendment basically says that the government is prevented from quartering, or housing, soldiers in people's homes. This isn't an issue that people worry much about today, but early Americans had direct experiences with this issue. Before the American Revolution, King George had sometimes forced them to house British soldiers. It bothered people enough that Americans made sure to add this amendment to their Constitution's Bill of Rights. Even this protection of the people's rights is not unlimited. Notice that the Third Amendment technically only forbids quartering in time of peace. In a time of war, it says, housing soldiers may be required if certain laws are passed. The Fourth Amendment says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, particularly describing the place to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized. This important protection says that without a very good reason, the government and its representatives, including the police, cannot search your property and take your possessions. It's a protection against unreasonable search and seizure. The limits on this freedom are built right into the amendment. Your property can be searched, and your possessions seized, if a search warrant is issued. A search warrant is a legal document, signed by a judge, allowing law enforcement to enter and search a location for evidence. Judges are supposed to issue search warrants only if they have probable cause, a reason to believe that a crime has been committed and that evidence will be found. Otherwise, no one, including the police, is allowed to search your home or property without permission. Have had his home searched, or his property confiscated, without a search warrant being produced. In fact, here's the text of the Fifth Amendment, one of several that deals with the rights of those accused of crimes. No person shall be held to answer for a crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use, without just compensation. First, the amendment guarantees due process of law. If you are arrested, you can't be held in jail forever without being indicted. An indictment is a formal charge, or accusation, of a crime. Then the accused has the right to a trial and fair and equal treatment under the law. Next, the Fifth Amendment forbids something called double jeopardy. This means that no person can be charged for the same crime twice. For example, if you are found not guilty of stealing from a store, you can never be tried for that exact same crime again. That doesn't mean you can shoplift freely from the same store, however. That would be a different crime. The Fifth Amendment protects a defendant, the accused, in a criminal trial, from being compelled to be a witness against himself. That means he doesn't have to answer any questions he doesn't want to, if the answers might make him appear guilty. The defendant has the right to simply plead the Fifth, and keep his mouth shut. Last, this amendment protects people from eminent domain, the taking of private property, usually land, for public use. This right is not unlimited. It doesn't happen often, but in certain cases, the government can take private property for public use, like the building of a highway or a school, if it determines the public need is more important. The Fifth Amendment, however, ensures that if this happens, the landowners will be justly compensated, or paid fairly, by the government. Learned about so far. Here's a different kind of practice. Each phrase on the right is a simpler translation of the original amendment. The Sixth Amendment continues with the rights of the accused. It says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. To break this down, The amendment guarantees Americans accused of crimes to trials that are speedy and public. It's open to interpretation what speedy means. In some situations, defendants wait a year or more for their trials to begin, but the amendment does imply that trials should be scheduled as quickly as possible. Defendants should not sit in jail for years and years unless they have been found guilty of a crime. Trials are also to be public, conducted openly, without secrecy, and with detailed records of what took place. That way, the public can judge for themselves whether or not justice has been done. The trials guaranteed by this amendment are jury trials. The defendant is to be judged guilty or not guilty, not by a single individual, but by a group of random, ordinary people, usually 12 of them. These jurors are selected so as to be impartial to the defendant. They don't know him or her, and are instructed to judge the case with an open mind based on the evidence. Last, every defendant is guaranteed the assistance of counsel, a lawyer, to help him or her navigate the legal system. Since hiring a lawyer can cost a lot of money, if the defendant cannot afford one, a court-appointed lawyer will assist them at no charge. The Seventh Amendment also guarantees Americans trial by jury, but for civil lawsuits. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. A suit, or lawsuit, is a civil legal matter between two people. There's no crime involved, but one person or party is suing another person for some form of damages, usually money. The Seventh Amendment states that if people in the civil lawsuit wish, they can also have their case decided by a jury of their peers. The one limitation: the suit must concern a value of at least $20. As you can imagine, almost all lawsuits are disagreements about $20 or more. The Eighth Amendment says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Bail is the money paid by a criminal suspect to get out of jail until a later court date. The money guarantees that the suspect will show up for court when he or she is supposed to. If not, they lose the money. The Eighth Amendment does not guarantee bail to all criminal suspects in all circumstances. Especially in cases of very violent crimes, bail may not be allowed by the judge at all. But the amendment does state that when bail is allowed, the dollar amount cannot be excessive considering the charges. For example, if someone was arrested for unpaid traffic tickets and the judge set a bail of $1 billion, that would certainly be excessive, because it would basically be the same thing as not allowing bail at all. The last part of the amendment forbids cruel and unusual punishments for criminal suspects who are found guilty. Another way to put this is, let the punishment fit the crime. The amendment doesn't go into detail about what kind of punishments might be cruel and unusual, but generally this phrase is considered to refer to torture. Even when a criminal is found guilty of a terrible crime, their punishment should not involve unusual physical or emotional pain. The Ninth and Tenth Amendment are a little different from the ones we've seen so far, but no less important. They don't mention any specific rights or freedoms of the American people, but instead refer to the people's other rights, those not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. The Ninth Amendment says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In other words, the American people have more rights than just those listed in the Bill of Rights. And because certain rights are enumerated or listed in the Constitution, doesn't mean the people don't have any other rights. These might include the right to marry, to vote, to get an education. The 10th Amendment refers more to government powers than the people's rights. It says that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This means that unless the Constitution gives a power specifically to the federal government, it belongs to the 50 states or to the people of those states. These are called reserved powers. And some of them, like regulating marriage, voting, and education, fit with the rights of the people referred to in the Ninth Amendment. State and local governments, not the federal government, issue marriage licenses, conduct elections, and educate young people. Do you understand what makes the 9th and 10th Amendments unique? Read this sentence. The 9th and 10th Amendments don't mention any specific blank of the American people, but instead refer to the people's other blank, those not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. In the blank space, type in the missing word that best completes the meaning of the sentence. Let's review the last 5 amendments. Now it's time for your final practice. You see here 4 brief scenarios involving the rights or freedoms of Americans. Some of these are legal scenarios that would be allowed under the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments you've learned about. Others are illegal scenarios that would not be allowed under the Bill of Rights. Which is which? Drag and drop the answer choices to the right boxes. You should have a match for each. Good luck! Here are your last 4 scenarios. Which are legal and which are illegal? Drag and drop the answer choices to the right boxes. When you're ready, click Submit to see how you did. Congratulations for completing this tutorial. You can view credits for the content